Turkey is not a major player. Militarily supplying, it could be a player in the Pakistani context. Pakistan has brought this upon itself, given India a leverage which is much stronger than many other diplomatic leverages that we have.
For decades, Pakistan has weaponized international forums to paint India as the aggressor in Kashmir. But not this time. Not after Pahalgam. When Islamabad convened the UN Security Council, hoping to corner India, the world saw through the performance and quietly condemned the puppeteer instead of the theatre. Will Pakistan finally face the cost of its terror games? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. On 5th May 2025, Pakistan tried to shift the spotlight, requesting a closed-door United Nations Security Council meeting under the agenda, the India-Pakistan question. The session, held in a side consultation room rather than the main horseshoe chamber, was meant to internationalize the fallout. Pakistan accused India of military aggression and suspending the Indus-Waters Treaty. But member states had tougher questions for Islamabad. Could Pakistan's plan to deflect blame survive global scrutiny? One by one, Security Council members turned the spotlight back on Islamabad. Lashkar-e-Taiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, the Resistance Front. These weren't just names, they were evidence. Evidence of Pakistan-based terrorism bleeding into India once again. Members pointed questions about training camps, cross-border infiltration, and state complicity. The falsehoods Pakistan had packaged for global consumption were shredded, quietly but completely, in a room of its peers. The question we ask is Pakistan isolated when it comes to the United Nations and the international community? There's no one better to answer this question than Ambassador Syed Akbaruddin, who served as India's envoy to the United Nations, dealt with Pakistan very closely, not just there, but also in New Delhi as spokesperson, and has been a very, very important person when it comes to how India formulated its responses post many a terror attack from Pakistan. Ambassador Akbaruddin, thank you so much for joining us here on the network.
Thank you very much, Geeta. It's a pleasure to join you on your network.
Well, Ambassador Akbaruddin, let's just begin with what happened at the United Nations Security Council, and then we'll go back to what is it and how can India really deal with Pakistan and Pak terrorism emanating from Pakistan. At the United Nations Security Council, not the first time that India and India's allies have taken the matter of Pak terror to the United Nations Security Council, but this time it's different. Pakistan went as a non-permanent member of the UNSC to the Security Council with concerns. Explain to us how this entire system of a non-permanent member taking up a matter really works at the United Nations Security Council.
So Geeta, usually the United Nations Security Council is functional around the year. What they usually do is they meet informally in what they call close consultations virtually every day. And if they have something of a nature which is ready to be formalized, they then meet in a formal session on the horseshoe table. Otherwise, they meet in the antechamber. It's a small room. It's not the main Security Council room. There, they meet informally. So there is no record kept for everybody to know who said what. Also, the number of people who meet there is very limited because each delegation has maybe 2 people there, etc. It's a small place where they meet, consider things informally, and if they have something to offer in a more formal sense, they then either have it as part of a formal meeting, or the president of the Security Council, after the discussion, comes out and in an oral statement to the press, indicates that this was the outcome of the discussion. Now, Pakistan, as you know, always tries to grandstand at multilateral forums. The idea is to try and use these fora as forums of not serious diplomacy, but public diplomacy. And that's primarily geared towards their domestic audience. So the events of the last few days uh, seem to have panned out that Pakistan, thinking that it's a member of the Security Council, a non-permanent member for 2 years, could try and get an outcome, perhaps at a very low level, through the informal consultation process, asked for a meeting. Generally, these meetings, nobody refuses because every member has a right to bring to the table its concerns about itself or about any other country. So the meeting was scheduled for yesterday evening, New York time. What usually happens in such a meeting is that the chair, in this case, it was Greece, asks whoever wants to raise a subject, raise it, and then goes around the table with everybody else indicating what their views are and whether they would be supportive of a outcome from this meeting or not. And that's what happened. Pakistan is on record of having said that it will raise the nuclear bogey, it will raise issues of the Indus Water Treaty, as well as this talk about false flag, etc., etc. And they raised that yesterday. What followed was a deafening silence from the collectivity of the Security Council. And that's a clear signal that Pakistan did not find any takers for its view. There ended the meeting. That ends the issue for now.
Well, Ambassador Akbaruddin, not the first time that we've seen the world shocked by what has happened when it comes to India and Pakistan. But when it comes to the international community, are you convinced that they have done enough to ensure that Pakistan is reined in? Because you were there, you've taken up the matter time and again, but nothing more than just words.
Fair enough. I think that's a realistic way of putting the global situation. We are in a volatile world, which is uncertain, unpredictable, ambiguous, and clearly in transition. So let's not expect a world where there is law and order in the perfect sense of in a state. International relations by themselves are amorphous because there is no power beyond sovereign authority. So what happens even in the best of times is that it becomes difficult to get an outcome in such a situation. And in our present world, it's unlikely to be an outcome to the satisfaction of anybody else. So that's primarily because the mechanism that was set up, the Security Council, is rather now an outdated mechanism. It was a mechanism set up in 1945 after the World War II. It's no longer fit for purpose in terms of the challenges that one will face in the 21st century world. So obviously, it's a suboptimal mechanism which is not delivering results, and that's why there's been a lot of talk about change, reform, etc. Everybody agrees that the mechanism is not satisfactory, but the difference remains on what should replace it. So we are in that phase of a transition where the old order is no longer there. A new one hasn't come into being. And in that twilight zone, don't expect sort of a congruence of views on any major issues, including issues relating to India and Pakistan.
Well, we've seen the modus operandi in the past. There is a difference this time around. You've served when a lot of the other major terror attacks took place, including Pulwama, Uri, but they were all targeting forces, Indian forces, Indian military. This is different. The play has become very different. Tourists were attacked. There was the religious angle to it, where they asked the religion of tourists before shooting them down. And in such a scenario, is that one of the reasons why you see this deafening silence when it comes to any support that goes to Pakistan? Is Pakistan isolated today, at least on this front?
So you're right. This was a very egregious and dastardly act, not seen in recent years. trying to bifurcate individuals on the basis of their community, etc., clearly aimed at creating dissension within India. Having said that, you've seen that everybody is critical and condemns the act. The issue is only what next to do. So there is a global consensus, and that came out even in the Security Council, a statement condemning the act. While the statement is not to our full satisfaction, but that there is a condemnation by members of the UN Security Council and other members of the global community, there is no doubt about. The challenge comes in translating that into further action, and that's where a suboptimal situation will never be able to fulfill our needs, even if Pakistan is isolated on this. The challenge is, how do you take the next step in ensuring that such acts go beyond condemnation? At the present stage, given the system of global governance we have, let's not expect more from that thing. We are grateful that people have supported us. Anything else that has to be done will have to be done by India in self-defense. There are, under international law, norms which allow, including through the UN Charter, Article 51, which says in self-defense, you can take action. And perhaps that's what is being looked at our leadership right now, rather than seeking a global effort at isolation, etc., because these are uncertain times. The costs and benefits of those efforts are difficult to assess. So it's now increasingly a world where states have to be their own decision makers and take appropriate action as they feel.
Right. You made a very important point, Ambassador, about the steps that India needs to take rather than looking at what has been done so far. We'll come to that, but before that, going back to the United Nations Security Council and the support that Pakistan gets time and again. This time around, the country was silent, but if there is an action that is required against Pakistan, that country always speaks and ensures that there's no action that can be taken against Rawalpindi, and I'm not saying Islamabad, and that is China. The kind of support that we see from China coming in for Pakistan, irrespective of what Pakistan is doing or has done, what's your reading on that, and how that changes the geopolitics, not just of the region, but of the world as well?
So let's start by acknowledging that multilateral platforms are playgrounds of geopolitics, because you have a conglomeration of 190 plus states, and those who have common interests converge. Having said that, there are ways to handle these things, but there are ways which demand an enormous amount of effort. So while, as you said, China always comes out in support of Pakistan, but there have been cases, for example, when we were able to get the designation of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. China, for several years, blocked us. For several years, vetoed proposals in that regard. But there were pathways that were available to us in the final instance, where we raised the bar so high that even China found it difficult to pay the price of that support. So states can raise the bar, but you can't do it on every occasion. Those will be rare occasions where you make it so difficult for even a permanent member to not be able to support its favored country. That happened once. It can happen again. But right now, given the divergences in the global order, it may be more difficult than what it was possible before.
Well, again, we're talking about China, but there's another country that has really supported Pakistan, and now we see sort of a deterrence that Pakistan wants to create when it comes to India, with the kind of maneuverings that we're seeing on the military front between Pakistan and Turkey, Ambassador Akbaruddin. A warship docking in Pakistan, a military aircraft landing in Pakistan. They've denied supplying arms, but a NATO country coming out and with the maneuverings that we are seeing, how do you read that?
So, Geeta, I have served in Islamabad during Kargil and during the Lahore bus trip, etc. So I'm aware of the deep ties between the Pakistani military and the Turkish military, and they go back to decades. It's not new. So let's be clear that this is a relationship which is pretty strong. It's a military to military relationship which has been in the making for decades. That some of it has now emerged is only a matter of public information now. But for diplomats, we know this for a long time. Uh, Given that there are commonalities between Turkey's military and the Pakistani military, this was only to be expected. And it's good that what was subterranean has come out into the open. And in any case, diplomatically, Turkey is not a major player. Militarily supplying, it could be a player in the Pakistani context of giving them some key elements of what is required. But then we have to acknowledge that these are normal ways in which subterranean allies sometimes submerge and they submerge for years and then they emerge to the surprise of everybody. But for diplomats, this is a known factor, and I'm certain the government of India and the Indian military have factored this into their equation because among diplomatic and military circles, this was a relationship that was well known.
Well, I have to ask you this because of your wide experience in serving as a diplomat for India, not just in Islamabad, but also in Saudi Arabia. How is the Islamic world looking at this, Ambassador Akbaruddin? How do you look at the shift that we're seeing now from what it used to be earlier, where they would actually come out in support of Pakistan, or keep quiet rather than actually coming out in support of India? Now we're seeing West Asia turn. It's turning drastically and in favor of India. What's your reading on how that has come about and where that's headed? And does IMEC, America, Saudi Arabia, India, these alliances, do they have a play because of which we're looking at more support coming to India rather than to Pakistan?
So, you're right that the equation between India and the Gulf states has fundamentally altered in the last, say, 10 or so years. I have served for long in Saudi Arabia, and I know at that stage, Pakistan was the dominant player in the Gulf in the late 80s, in the early 90s, etc. That has fundamentally altered. It's an equation that most in the media have not seen because we are so focused on our ties with the US. We are focused on our ties with the European Union. So, for example, Prime Minister Modi is the only Indian Prime Minister who's ever visited every Gulf state in the last 10 years, and maybe most Gulf states more than once. That personal equation has over the last few years translated into a burgeoning relationship. So let me give you an example. India and UAE are now committed to having by 2030 a bilateral trade of 100 billion non-oil trade. And if you look at the Gulf Cooperation Council as a collective entity, they almost rival European Union as India's trade partners. Again, nobody has seen this, but it's an assiduously nurtured relationship, which is now bearing fruits because that relationship has moved from generally a soft relation of people to people equation to a much more solid relationship of trade, economy, defense, the and even investments in key defense sectors. So it's a relationship that bears watching. It's a relationship that has not caught the attention. It's been subterranean for so long. And just like you mentioned, another relationship, this is a relationship between India and the Gulf countries, which is a factor of just the last decade or a little more than a decade, I might say. Here are new trends in neighborly ties, which we have not noticed, but which are going to have a huge impact geopolitically as well as in our ties with the rest of the world.
Well, then coming to the aspect that you touched upon earlier, that is, what can India really do? We're looking at diplomatic options that have been taken, the diplomatic measures that have been taken by India, some unprecedented. We'll begin with Indus Waters Treaty. Could this be a game changer? I mean, they're suspending Shimla Accord, but is Indus Waters Treaty or keeping it in abeyance a game changer?
So you're right. This is a unprecedented move. It's been thought of many times, never been ventured upon. Uh, because I remember even as a young diplomat, we had these discussions when I served in Islamabad in 1998, etc., whether this could be a thing, but it was never ventured on. So obviously, it is a major change in our strategic posture, in our posture towards Pakistan. And it doesn't come without adequate thought being provided to it, a lot of discussion, a lot of careful consideration before we've arrived at. It certainly will be a challenge to Pakistan. And Pakistan has nobody but itself to blame because India, as an upper riparian, was an outlier. Not many upper riparians are willing to give anything to the lower riparian. Look at China. It has no arrangements with several of its lower riparian partners. Look at many other countries, including the US. The lower riparians have a very small, have very small leverages in their ties with upper riparians, and that's even what is acknowledged in international law. Yet, India was an outlier both in terms of the Indus Water Treaty as well as the Ganges Pact with Bangladesh. It's rare for a upper riparian to share waters through a treaty modality. Pakistan, by misusing it, by using lawfare against India, has forfeited that right of that ability of India to be gracious in its engagement with that. And it will come to rue this in the years to come.
Should we have done it before? You were serving during Pulwama. In fact, you were there in New York when Balakot happened. I'll ask you about Balakot, but should we have done this on Indus Waters long ago?
So there are no, they say hindsight is 2020. And I think it's unfair to now put back and see what it was. But I think the decision on the Indus waters has come about after every other diplomatic lever has been exhausted. Look, India and Pakistan have very limited levers against each other. We haven't had high commissioners for 5 years now. That's because Pakistan decided not to allow the Indian High Commissioner to function after Article 370 abrogation. So for 5 years or plus, we don't have high commissioners. Also, we have reduced our mission strength. I remember when I was there, it was more than 110. Then it became 60. Now it's become 30. So you can see the amount of leverage that India and Pakistan have bilaterally is very limited. And we've just discussed in the Security Council where there is no traction for Pakistan. So in multilateral diplomacy also has a very limited traction. So what do you do in cases where bilateral levers are limited, multilateral levers are non-existent? you then look for some lever that gives you advantage. And clearly, the Indus Water Treaty gives India that leverage, which will, as I said, make Pakistan rue its decision of not paying fairly in terms of the waters game. It could have ensured that it does not push India into a situation where, as an upper riparian, India is now behaving like a normal upper riparian. So it's not behaving abnormally. It used to behave abnormally by being very gracious previously. Now it's no longer an outlier. It says, I will do what normal upper riparians do. So Pakistan has brought this upon itself, given India a leverage which is much stronger than many other diplomatic leverages that we have.
Okay, before I let you go, the military options. Is a Balakot, a repeat of a Balakot, enough? A surgical strike? Or should India be looking at more? You were there explaining to the world what India did and why India did what it did. But will that be enough this time around after Pahalgam, which has been a game changer? Prime Minister Modi, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, they've all said that there is going to be an appropriate response. So what, according to you, would be an appropriate response militarily? Would a Balakot suffice and satisfy? Or should we be looking at taking the likes of Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhars out?
So, Geeta, I must confess, I'm not a military person. I don't have any expertise in areas of what would be the best targets that India can focus on. What I can put it is in a different manner, that as a diplomat, I can see that whatever decision Indian leadership takes in promoting Indian interests after this dastardly attack, Indian diplomacy will be able to handle the fallout. So a decision of this sort is best left to those who have information at their beck and call, who can see the bigger picture rather than us who see these things in limited manner. But as a diplomat and somebody who observes global relations, international relations very closely, I can certainly say that any fallout of any decision that the Indian political leadership takes, Indian diplomacy will be able to manage. And that's the more important thing. What the decision is going to be, it's not for us to speculate. And I think we leave it to our leadership. We have to have that confidence that they will do the best for us.
You make a very important point. Rather than doing the guesswork that we see a lot of people, talking heads, do on television today, you're not going into the nitty-gritties of what militarily India can do, but you make a very important and a bigger point. And I ask you this again. Should India do anything that it does militarily in terms of targeted killing or a surgical strike or an open conflict limited to a certain area? Whatever it is that India does, you're saying that the diplomacy part of it can be handled, that our officers will be able to handle the fallout of it when it comes to the international community?
Yes. All I'm saying is that India now has the right of self-defense, which is guaranteed to it under international law. And our diplomats are skilled enough to ensure that that right of self-defense will provide India a clear cloak of immunity in whatever decisions that our leaders take. And we must, again, just like we have confidence in our leadership, Indian diplomats have been successful in thwarting many of these efforts in the past, parrying against a multiplicity of opponents, difficult issues. And I'm confident that whatever decision our leadership takes and is implemented by the concerned authorities, Indian diplomacy will be able to manage the diplomatic fallout, and it will in no way, these will in no way impede India's growth into a developed economy as we look at Viksit Bharat at 2047.
On that note, Ambassador Akbaruddin, thank you so much for joining us here on the India Today Network.
Thank you very much, Geeta.